What if the Vatican feared not just heresy, but heritage? What if a single bloodline anointed by myth and sharpened by centuries was once prophesied to rise again and claim not just a throne, but the throne not of Gaul, not of France, but of Rome itself? And what if that future was quietly, systematically erased, not with fire, but with silence? It sounds far-fetched, doesn't it? Like something whispered in the corner of a dusty library, half truth and half wine-drunk legend. But some stories don't fade because they're false, they linger because something in them refuses to die. You're not supposed to know much about the Merovingians. That's not entirely an accident. Most history books either skip over them or treat them like an eccentric footnote, a tribe of long-haired kings ruling a half-barbarian, half-Christian realm between the fall of Rome and the rise of Charlemagne. They are portrayed as wild, pagan-ish rulers, with a loose grip on power slowly fading into irrelevance until the Church and the Carolingians came along to restore divine order. You're told they mattered, briefly, then disappeared. But what if they didn't? What if their story wasn't a dead end, but a door, one that was bolted shut because of what lay behind it? A prophecy, a lineage, a threat. The Merovingians didn't just rule. They were believed to have sacred blood. Their origins, at least in part, are wrapped in myth with tales of sea beasts and divine union. And for a while, the Church didn't oppose that idea. On the contrary, it leaned into it. The kings were protectors of Christendom, wielders of power by divine right. The bond between throne and altar was mutually beneficial, until it wasn't. Until prophecies began to circulate, not the polite kind that predict victory in battle or seasonal harvests, but the dangerous kind. The kind that whispers of return, of upheaval, of dynasties destined not to vanish, but to rise again. That was when the tone shifted. Suddenly, Merovingian memory became awkward. Their tombs were sealed, their texts misfiled. Their names slowly bled out of the public imagination. And perhaps most curiously of all, no saint's halo ever graced their line despite multiple martyrdoms, visions, and royal piety. It's as if something or someone needed them to be forgotten. Tonight we unbolt that door. We'll follow whispers through medieval manuscripts, scan censored letters for meanings between the lines, descend into crypts sealed by ecclesiastical decree, and trace maps that were never meant to be seen by modern eyes. From dusty archives to buried prophecies, we will chase a singular question: was there once a vision, a prophecy, that the Merovingians would return, and that the Vatican silenced it to preserve its power? This isn't a fairy tale. It's a trail, one that's been buried, rewritten, and nearly erased. But we're going to follow it anyway. Before we venture further into the shadows, take a moment to subscribe so you never miss a secret that history has tried to forget. You first meet them in fragments, a mosaic here, a Latin chronicle there, but the silhouette is unmistakable. Long-haired warriors in wolf pelts crowned with iron and incense claiming divine sanction, not through conquest, but by birthright. The Merovingians didn't invent kingship in Europe, but they made it feel eternal. Their rule over the early Franks wasn't just political. It was mythic, with roots that slithered into both heaven and the underworld. According to their own origin story, they descended from a creature of the sea, a Kinator no less, who impregnated the wife of a Frankish chieftain while she bathed in sacred waters. That tale, half Leviathan and half liturgy, wasn't whispered in shame. It was recited in the open, emblazoned with pride. To the Merovingians, this divine or perhaps otherworldly union explained their right to rule, not through conquest, through chosenness, through blood. And it worked. At least for a while. By the 5th century, Clovis I had unified the Frankish tribes converted to Christianity and brokered a rare alliance between crown and crozier. The Church, seeing a chance to tame the wild northern lands, welcomed the baptism of Clovis as a divine victory. Oil was poured, hymns were sung, and a new empire seemed born. But it wasn't just a political arrangement. The alliance implied theological weight. If Clovis and his line ruled by divine right, then removing them would be awkward, maybe even blasphemous. That's why the Merovingians were once called Rex Crinitus, the long-haired kings. Their hair wasn't vanity. It was sacrament. Cutting it was considered tantamount to dethroning them. To shear a Merovingian was to sever his link with the sacred. It's also why centuries later, when rivals sought to end their reign, the scissors came out before the swords. Yet beneath the divine hair and mythical lineage lies a complication. The Church's alliance with Clovis began to fray almost as soon as it formed. His descendants were often weak, scattered, or suspiciously short-lived. Power began to leak from their hands into those of their mayors of the palace, especially one family that smelled opportunity, the Carolingians. But we'll get to them soon enough. For now, let's return to the idea that the Merovingians were once seen not as heretics or rivals, but as divine guardians. The early bishops of Gaul, particularly in Reims and Tours, praised the line with reverence. Some even suggested that Clovis's dynasty would inaugurate a Christian age of peace. In certain texts, Merovingian kings are portrayed as chosen vessels guided by visions and protected by angels in battle. It wasn't just flattery, it was theological framing, which makes what came next feel less like evolution and more like erasure. Because buried within this history is an obscure chronicle, the Chronica Fredigaria, that offers a tantalizing deviation from the usual script. Among the annals of battles and treaties, it inserts a strange, almost allegorical episode, a prophecy muttered by a dying monk that the line of the sea beast would one day return not in strength, but in sanctity. Most scholars dismiss it as poetic nonsense. A few, and you can practically hear them whispering from the footnotes, suggest otherwise. They wonder if the early Merovingian image as divine rulers wasn't just flattery, but a theological framework later buried because it became inconvenient. There is also the problem of their bodies. Unlike later monarchs who were interred with ceremony